So in this video, we'll continue with the emergency powers of the president. We are going to be looking at the national emergency. So how is a national emergency declared? A national emergency can be declared by the president on a written request by the cabinet consisting of the prime minister and ministers of the cabinet rank to such an effect. So the cabinet has to send a written request to the president asking him to declare a national emergency. This provision was added by the 44th Amendment Act of 1978 after Indira Gandhi had unilaterally declared a national emergency in 1975 without consulting her cabinet. So right now the Prime Minister cannot unilaterally declare a national emergency. He has to consult with his cabinet and the cabinet has to agree, and then they have to send a written request to the president. This amendment, that is the 44th Amendment Act of 1978, added this feature. This amendment was meant so that the Prime Minister would not be able to act unilaterally like Indira Gandhi did in 1975. Such a proclamation of emergency must be approved by the Parliament, each house independently with 2/3 majority within 1 month. I repeat, such a proclamation of emergency must be approved by the Parliament by each house independently with 2/3 majority. So there cannot be a joint sitting, and each house has to independently approve this with 2/3 majority. Please remember that the 44th Amendment Act reduced the time from 2 months to 1 month. That is, the proclamation of emergency has to be approved within 1 month. Before the 44th Amendment Act of 1978, 2 months time was given. So parliamentary approval has to happen by a special majority, that is majority of the total membership of the house, and that is a simple majority of the total membership of the house and a majority of not less than 2/3 of the members present at voting. This is a special majority. So each house has to pass this by a special majority. The provision for special majority was also added by 44th Amendment Act of 1978. Before that, parliamentary approval only needed a simple majority. So it was the 44th Amendment Act that changed it from a simple majority into a special majority, and it also changed the time that was given to the Parliament to approve the proclamation of emergency from 2 months to 1 month. A national emergency can be declared when the security of the country is threatened by external aggression, war, or armed rebellion. It is not necessary for the Union to wait for such an event to occur to declare an emergency. The President can declare an emergency if he is satisfied that the danger is imminent. So the national emergency is not just imposed after the event has happened. It can also be preventive in nature. That is, if the President is of the opinion that the country is in imminent danger, then he can proclaim a national emergency based on the advice of the cabinet. In case of war or external aggression, the emergency is known as external emergency. In case of an armed rebellion, it is known as an internal emergency. So in case of war or external aggression, it is known as external emergency, and in case of armed rebellion, it is known as internal emergency. So I have already said before that a national emergency can be declared for the entire country or a part of the country. So the national emergency can be declared effective to be only for a part of the country or for the entire country. This was a necessary feature that was added by the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976. It enabled the President to restrict the emergency to a specific part of the country. Now, for example, let's say there is an armed rebellion in Delhi, and even Punjab, Haryana gets engulfed into it. So the President is empowered to impose an emergency only on these areas and not on the entire country. Before the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 added this feature, national emergency was generally imposed for the entire country. Now it can be applied only to a small part of the country as well. So the national emergency can be imposed only for armed rebellion and not for internal disturbance. So there has to be armed rebellion. In the case of that means it has to be a violent rebellion. So in 1975, Indira Gandhi unilaterally imposed emergency on the grounds of internal disturbance, although there was no such disturbance, because internal disturbance is not defined in the constitution or any other law. So Indira Gandhi wantonly imposed the emergency, saying that there is internal disturbance, although there was no such internal disturbance. It was finally concluded that the word internal disturbance had very wide connotations. Hence, the 44th Amendment Act of 1978 edited the Constitution so that an emergency could be imposed only on the grounds of internal armed rebellion and not just an internal disturbance. So, internal armed rebellion means the rebellion has to be violent, or the people who are creating the rebellion have to be armed in some way, that is with weapons. It could be a machete or it could be guns. So only in case of an armed rebellion can there a national emergency be imposed, apart from war and external aggression. So we have understood how the national emergency is imposed, that is on the written advice of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, the President imposes it. Now how is a national emergency revoked? The President is empowered to revoke the national emergency unilaterally without parliamentary approval. Remember that parliamentary approval within a month is necessary when emergency is declared, otherwise the emergency directly lapses. The Lok Sabha can pass a resolution with a simple majority against the continuation of the emergency. This safeguard was introduced by 44th Amendment Act of 1978. Also note that the Rajya Sabha need not pass such a resolution for the emergency to be revoked. So only the Lok Sabha can pass a simple resolution with a simple majority. Remember that to impose the national emergency, we had both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha that had to pass the resolution for emergency with 2/3 majority. In case of revoking the emergency, the Lok Sabha can pass a simple resolution with a simple majority. Also, if 1/10 the total number of the members of Lok Sabha give a written notice to the Speaker or to the President if the House is not in session, then a special sitting of the House is convened within 14 days. Such a session is meant to consider a resolution disapproving the continuation of the proclamation of emergency. So let's say if the opposition says that okay, we are not convinced that there should be a national emergency, then 1/10 the total number of members of the Lok Sabha have to give a written notice to the Speaker. If the House is not in session, then they can go and give such a written notice to the President. Then within 14 days, the President can summon the House, and then the session of such a House can consider a resolution disapproving the continuation of the proclamation of emergency. Next, we will look at the duration of the national emergency. So what is the maximum duration of a national emergency? The emergency initially is imposed for 6 months. If both the houses approve, it can be extended for another 6 months. That means both the houses have to approve again. That is, the first time it is approved within 1 month, then both the houses have to approve again. Then it can be extended for another 6 months. So the first approval by both the houses of the Parliament and the President gives 6 months. Then again it has to be approved by both the houses. Then it is extended for another 6 months. There is no maximum duration as such, and with parliamentary approval being accorded every 6 months, the emergency can keep on extending. If the Lok Sabha is dissolved when the proclamation of emergency needs to be approved, then the emergency survives up to a month after the next Lok Sabha sitting, provided that it has been approved by the Rajya Sabha in the meanwhile. I repeat, if the Lok Sabha is dissolved when the proclamation of emergency needs to be approved, then the emergency survives up to a month after the next Lok Sabha sitting, provided that it has been approved by the Rajya Sabha in the meanwhile. So let's say the term of the Lok Sabha is over and a new Lok Sabha is coming, that is the Lok Sabha is dissolved. In the interim period, if a national emergency is imposed, then the Rajya Sabha has to approve it within a month. Then till the first sitting of the Lok Sabha comes in, and 1 month after it, the national emergency stands. And if the Lok Sabha, that is the new Lok Sabha, approves the national emergency within 1 month, then the national emergency continues, otherwise it is repealed. So what does a national emergency mean for fundamental rights of the citizen? Under Article 358, we have that the 6 freedoms under Article 19 are automatically suspended when an external national emergency is declared. So external national emergency means war or external aggression. So under Article 358, the 6 freedoms under Article 19 are automatically suspended when an external national emergency is declared. This is given under Article 358. The freedoms are only suspended in case of an external emergency. The 44th Amendment Act of 1978 brought in this provision, that is keeping the 6 freedoms intact in case of an internal emergency. So if there is only an internal emergency, that is, let's say there is an armed rebellion and then the president imposes the national emergency, then the 6 freedoms under Article 19 are kept intact. However, in case of a war or external aggression, that is an external emergency, the 6 freedoms under Article 19 are automatically suspended. The Constituent Assembly understood the need for suspension of certain freedoms that citizens enjoy during normal times. Hence, they provided for the suspension of some fundamental rights immediately upon the emergency being proclaimed. No separate order or law is necessary to strip away the freedoms under Article 19 during an external emergency. In case of an internal emergency, that is an armed rebellion, Article 358 does not automatically kick in. That is, the 6 freedoms under Article 19 continue to remain intact. Also, the state may be forced to bring in certain laws which are in contravention of Article 19 or other fundamental rights, save Article 20 and 21, during the emergency. Such laws would be valid only for the duration of emergency, and once the emergency is revoked, these laws cease to have effect. That is, even after Article 358 kicks in case of an external emergency, there could be other laws that are brought in that are in contravention of Article 19. However, these laws continue to remain in force during the emergency, even if they are in violation of Article 19. However, such laws would only be valid during the emergency, and once the emergency is revoked, these laws will cease to have effect if they are in contravention of any fundamental rights. So even when an emergency is in progress, Article 20 and 21 of the Constitution cannot be transgressed. So that will continue to exist. That is, right to life and liberty will continue to be a fundamental right, and it will continue to have effect even under a national emergency, and that cannot be taken away.